I just like to say it's always change is hard, right? Being in groups that are different are hard. It's hard, right? Let's just acknowledge that. Even for myself, walking into rooms that look uniquely different than me is challenging. So we have a tendency to go with people who look, act, and breathe the same. But understanding but being in relationship with individuals who are quite different is where all the human growth happens. You cannot grow a cent. You can't grow a micro bit more if you're around people who are exactly the same as you. No growth happens. You're all the same,
Right.
right? So in order for you to grow, you got to be around people who are different.
All right. Well, welcome. I'm Pam Hoelzle, and I am so excited to have Kyle Steele with me. He is a rock star and man who is committed to accomplishing mission through family, conversation, community building, and social entrepreneurship. Kyle, I'm so excited that we get to spend some time together and everyone else
Yeah,
gets to hear and learn of your amazing self. There's so many things I want to talk about. I really want to get into the beloved framework that you're working on and your
yeah.
community building today. But I thought I'd start off with, since not everyone knows you as well as I do, tell a little about what you're most excited about. I know it's your son's birthday today, but what are you most excited about right now in life?
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm most excited about, right? He's turning 2, so that's a great thing. Um, I think it's those things that you just talked about earlier, right? Like overall, I have this mission in my life that I've been following for quite some time, and it's to help people find and fearlessly move into the power of their unique story. I've been talking about this for, like I said, some time now, and I'm able to accomplish that through a variety of ways, which is through community building, my work as a managing partner of a co-working space in downtown Orlando, through social entrepreneurship with my work over at Rally, which is helping social entrepreneurs who are passionate about solving real issues create sustainable ventures. And then through the culture work that I'm doing through the Beloved Community Framework, helping cultures or helping organizations and individuals think about like how do they engage tough conversations, tough problems, but in a way where they just don't just talk about it, just sit in just talking mode, where they're actually moving towards a solution that's restorative and healing. And then last but not least, my family, right? Like I look at them as definitely instruments that are available to me, that come alongside of me that allow me to be able to do the work that I'm doing. And so those are the things that I'm relatively excited about generally.
Yeah. Well, you've always had this integration. I definitely have not had it. And so I think I've always looked at you with some awe in terms of the way, when you say mission, right? I think of a lot of business people or entrepreneurs that use that word kind of solely for their organizations.
Yeah.
How and when did you get this it seems like it's just natural to you that your mission is everything, your life, your work.
Yeah. For me, it became a practice of probably back in 2014, 15, maybe, where even before then, like I was trying to understand, like, what is the life I'm here to live, right? Like, I believe that I'm here for a purpose. And so what is that mission? And I wanted to live intentionally in that mission. I just didn't want to meander through life. And so as I started to explore that, through some, bad relationships and mental health counseling and things like that, I started to get an idea of like what that was. I was reading a book that I can't remember the name of it, that my mental health counselor advised or asked me to take a look at. And in it, one of the things it was asking to do was to say, okay, you're here for a purpose. There's a story that's being written. You're here to participate in it and actually to co-author that story. So let's take a step back and let's try to figure out what that story is and what that mission is. And so I started to look at my life and the life I live, the bad things, the good things, the people around me, What was I good at? What was I not good at? And through just that work of just analyzing my previous story, the stage I was put on, it allowed me to come to a place where I was able to then say, okay, here's what I generally think that the direction I'm moving in, right? This is the mission for me. And then through there, it became very important for me just to frame everything that I did through, or filter everything I do through that mission, right? Because I felt like if I was always moving into that mission and accomplishing and using and strapping on things that help me accomplish that mission, then I was going to live my most fulfilling, my most purposeful, my most joyous, my most peaceful life.
Yeah. So give us an example like filter. That's powerful. So in the last month or something, what's something that didn't get through the filter? I mean, how does it work for you in
Yeah.
actuality?
So I talk about this actually in terms of uh, everything is an interchangeable tool except my family, right? So I look at it, the analogy I always use is like you're building a house. The mission is to build a beautiful house, but as you build that house, like there's tools that you need at a time, and there's tools that you may not need. And so, like when you first start a house, you need a bulldozer. As you complete the house, you no longer need a bulldozer, and so you take the bulldozer and you move it to the side, and you pick up another tool. So the things I do in general, the mission, I'm constantly assessing what are the things that allow me to take the steps towards it. And then from there, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, there's tools that are useful at the stage I'm at, and then there's tools that I previously had that are no longer useful. So one of the things is the education stuff that I was doing for quite some time. It served its purpose uh, for that stage I was in, and then maybe about a year ago, I made a very conscious decision to put that tool down because it no longer fit for where I was going, right? And so that was one of the things. And I get things all the time where people talk to me about joining boards or being participating in things. And the first question I ask is, how does this thing help me move my mission forward? And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And I'm very intentional about staying in my lane, and because I know this is my lane, right? And I'm not gonna try to be over here or over here. I can't do everything. I think that's a little bit arrogant to believe that you can be in all lanes and do all things well. Like there's people who are uniquely positioned and gifted and talented to be able to do certain things that I may be okay at, but they're better at. And so I'm
Yeah.
okay letting that stuff go and just staying in my lane and saying, just I'm gonna be focused on my mission and allow everybody else and trust that everybody else is gonna be focused on theirs. And we're gonna all together collectively get to the place that we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and man, when I hear that, it's just like a sense of relief. Like if we can just have that kind of sense of boundary and be okay with it, right? Like I'm committing to this. I'm all in here, and
Yeah.
that means I can't be somewhere else. I love on the bottom of your email. I got to read this. Instead of endless productivity, I practice. I practice what work and rest and attending to my growth in all dimensions of my health, soul. And so for that reason, right? I and the people I'm responsible for are done working at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and we do not work Saturday and Sunday. When I see that on your email, it's just like, I mean, I have been the woman with no boundaries, the workaholic my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
and I have had times where I've been able to. When did you get there? How are you living that?
Mm-hmm.
And share a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
So that's a very interesting statement. Like I probably back in 2016, I remember reading a statement that, because I'm a Christian, and and the statement was that um, God gives us all the time that we need, uh, provisions us with all the time that we need to wholly be present and to tend to the things that He's blessed us with. And so when I sat on that statement, the reality became to me that if I look at all the things as gifts, right? My mental well-being, my health, my family, my work, right? Friends, family. all these things have been given to me. And so the belief is that I have enough time to attend to all of those things, right?
Mm, mm,
And so that was the first notion, right? Like I don't have to rob one thing to attend for another. And so then therefore it's like, well, how do I attend to them? And then it became a realization that it's about rest, right? So I don't use the word work-life balance. I don't use that statement. I use the word rest. Like you have to know when to rest things, right? And so like in the natural world, the seasons are here for a reason. The seasons allow the earth to rest, for people to rest, right? So that flourishing can occur, right? It can't be growth season always. It can't be rest season always, right? And so how that applies to me individually is that, in the simplest sense, like if I sleep all day, sleep is necessary. I must sleep. But if I sleep all day, then I can't attend to my work, my family, those other things.
yeah.
If I stay up all night, then I can do that. But then ultimately, my physical body, my things, everything starts to deteriorate. And so it's just living into the tension, knowing that you have to rest all things. You have to rest. You have to know when to rest your work. You have to know when to rest family. You have to know when to rest friends. You have to know when to rest your mind. You have to know when to rest your body. You have to know when to rest all things. And so just kind of being in tune with those periods and understanding that rest is essential to the human experience. I feel like for me, it's been a good thing, right? It's a tension where I'm always struggling with. I don't always get it right, but that's the tension that I'm okay with living with. And I know that as long as I live with the tension, um, I'm okay. I'm moving in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Because so yeah,
Yeah. Because I met you in time where you were running a tech company, and I don't think
yeah,
you weren't quite at that self-aware, or you weren't at
no,
that place yet, right?
no. I was getting there, but I
And
wasn't
so the
there.
the contrast, right, of it's
Yeah,
things we believe, and then all of a sudden we look up and we go, we don't believe that at all. Actually, it's the dichotomy. It's the actual opposite, right? Like this all
yeah,
work, because I got to get
yeah.
to a deliverable is killing my soul and every other part of my life.
Yeah, and I think that for me, like that, it extends even outwardly. Like, so in that email line, like one of the things I talk about is in the spheres of my authority, right? And so, so I'm advocating for these things within my own household, right? Like for my wife to rest, my son to rest, um, and to understand where the boundaries are. I'm advocating for these things amongst the people who work for me, right? Like
What
they
does that
know.
look like in a work culture? Like,
Well, one is that signature line, right? It's a very easy way to let people know who interact with me that this is how I operate, right? And so in the work culture, it's like, hey, like let's just take the co-working space. It's like, look, we're not in a business where there's life and death emergencies happening, right? Maybe sometimes there might be, right?
right.
And the other thing is that we're not in a position of scarcity. What we believe is that what's ours is ours. We just got to just keep working for it, and we just need to be prepared to do the things we need to do. Um, and so this is our culture. This is who we are. And so we're going to rest. Like after 5 p.m., we just kind of just stop responding to stuff, right? We don't
Mm-hmm.
just people just know in general because that's on our signature line that that's
Yeah.
how we operate. So that it's so you can't email us at 8 o'clock at night and expect that you get an answer, right? And
Right.
people we internally cross that line, but it's one of those things that we try to hold ourselves accountable to. Like, wait, hold on, we're not doing this, right? Like, there's a flurry of things that happened this weekend that I got emails on, and I just waited till the morning in order to respond to it because it was I needed to rest, and it was my son's birthday, and I wanted to be present.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so
All mental health practices, right? Like one of the things I think that's always been interesting, and as I watch you, relationships are first and foremost. Like you call yourself a community builder, right? And I
mm,
think you are, but I think what at what point did relationships like it's become your sweet spot or the tool you were using to make a difference?
uh I don't know. I mean, I don't know when that happened. I just know that I know that I can't. I know that I'm very clear on the fact that we are not designed to do life alone.
Mm.
right? And that everything gets better when we bring other people alongside of us. And so like the gifts that I have, the talents I have them, right? And if I know them and I own them and I do them well, when I start strapping on other individuals and we're all pointed towards a single direction that is hopefully leading to flourishing, we all do our role really, really well and know our talents really well, then we're going to get to a better place. So my life is better when I have other people. I'm able to get to the destination that I'm trying to get to when I have other people, right? And so it's the resisting the resistance of self sufficiency, right? The culture of, well, it's all me and I can do it by myself. That is not the truth, right?
Right.
That
But it's
that
very it's very prevalent, right, in the entrepreneur tech community, the independence thing of I'm doing this independence, I got to do it, I got to make it happen versus the interdependence. Was
yeah.
for you, was it always just more natural for you to be interdependent with others, or was there something that happened where you started to see?
Uh, I think it was not natural for me to be interdependent of others. I think that the way I was raised and my life circumstances, that I quickly fell into a position of self sufficiency. Like I need to do this, and the reason why underlying it's because of fear or distrust or something of that nature, something underlying that was not good. I didn't want to be vulnerable. I didn't want to expose myself to other people's issues and flaws and things like that and how they can damage me, right? And so, as I started, I guess, maturing and becoming more aware, I understood that was important. That the ability to open myself up to the help of others, to allow myself to be vulnerable, to push back against that fear and distrust that was keeping me from being interdependent. Um, uh, it was like it was better, and over the last 5 6 years, like I'm convinced because I've seen it happen that's a better pathway for me, and so I just think that the whole independence thing is just it's like if you pull back through like why people try to function independently, the root
Yep.
of it, there's a bad thing at the root of it,
Something has
which is
happened, and it's fear, it's scarcity,
right,
it's a more
right.
closed down way of living. We're protecting ourselves.
Yeah, like there's a guy, people always quote him, but anyway, I looked up. They was talking about like the heart, right? The fact that vulnerability, what we do in vulnerability is we take, because we're fearful, we lock our hearts inside. The analogy he used is like a coffin, right? So that nothing can get to it, a wooden
Mm.
box. But really, that wooden box is a coffin. It's airless. The air is steel, and what ends up happening is that over time the heart hardens because it doesn't have any fresh air, cannot breathe and stuff, and it has an impact on the individual. So that's what ends up. That's why I think that, like I said, when people have that independence, like they're actually doing themselves a disservice when they're trying to just do everything by themselves, and they're hardening themselves, their souls, and also preventing their flourishing, right? And so if we can resist, understand what like I said, the negative emotion is, the experience, and start to lean into the ability that life is better when we come alongside people, um, then and experience that, then we can see that actually we flourish when we live in those type of communities.
Yeah. I know you've made it, you're always making shifts. Like I think of you as a permanent beta kind of person. You're
Mm.
always in permanent beta, using lean, iterating, learning from yourself. I know there was a shift as as you moved. You've been doing rally and working at Credo for a while, but the beloved framework and this new work, what happened and how did it tie to what's going on in the world with the pandemic and everything in terms of your movement into more and more of this beloved framework and the work you're doing
Yeah.
there?
Uh, it was actually, so I had been thinking about So the George Floyd incident, when it occurred, it impacted me, and the reason, it's not that I've never not had a fear or understanding of what happened. Right, as a black male, I sit in an interesting position in this world, here in the United States, where there's a natural discomfort towards police, even if you're doing everything correctly, because I've been on the other end of bad police behavior, right? Um, but the thing that about that event that was uniquely different this point in time was that I was a husband and a father, and so I
Mm.
watched my wife respond to it in a way that was distressing for me. And the reason why she was responding to it in a way that's distressful, because someone was losing her life and unjustly, but she was looking at it from the perspective of a mother, and if that was her son. And I'm looking at my son and thinking like, man, like I have to teach him how to navigate a world that, where I have to teach him things that no one else has to necessarily teach their children of other races. So, for example, you keep your receipts, right? Because things will happen if a police officer shows up. You can't be just happy. You got to put your hands on the steering wheel, turn your dome lights on. Like there's all these preemptive things, and the reason why I'm teaching him these things is so that he doesn't lose his life, right? And I recognize I have to teach him that, right? Like instead, like I could be teaching him about baseball, and there's other folks, like I said, who don't have to teach him these things. And so I responded to it, through some visual images, and the Central Florida Foundation. Some people over there caught wind of it. They saw it. It was really popular. They invited me to be on a panel. I thought long and hard about the panel. I was there with some city council persons and some other individuals who were pretty well known, and for some reason my voice resonated with most people. And so I started getting called into these directions, like into the conversation about race in America, right? And one of the things that I was struggled with was like, I'm not a protester, I'm not a burn a building kind of guy down. And it was important for me to find my voice and my platform. And so as a result, I just told everybody, like, I can't really talk about this until I figure that out, right? Like, I need to figure out what's my authentic voice in this. And so I took that time, and the pandemic, which is odd, gave me the time to quietness to figure that out. And that's where I ended up taking, uh, because of my relationships with people, my involvement in some things, my own understanding of some things, I took and I merged two concepts. One, the concept of the beloved community, which Keynes talks about, which is a society that's just, affords equal opportunity to all, and is undergirded by love. And then I strapped it onto what's called the restorative justice approach, which is a longstanding approach with dealing with, specifically in the cases of youth, it's been like, criminals, and how do you bring criminals and victims together, offenders and victims of crimes together, to be able to restore both individuals' dignity and then create restoration out of that process, right? And so really a truer sense of justice. And so I took that concept, merged it together, and that's how I came up with the beloved community framework. And then I felt comfortable with that mechanism, because it was about helping people have hard conversations with a very specific framework, but the whole intent was to help people have those hard conversations in a dignified way, in an inclusive way that led towards a restorative solution, right? And that really appealed to me.
Yeah. I think you talk about it, and want to go deeper in terms of the empathy. What are you finding in terms of, as obviously in the last couple of years we've seen like the contrast and the differences and the polarity, and what are you finding for yourself? How are you and your family navigating being with others that are different, that vote different, that look different?
Mm-hmm.
At a personal level, how are you practicing it? And I'd love you to walk us into
Yeah.
that, because I feel like it really hit me, right? Like it was like polarization at your own Thanksgiving table, right? And you're starting to think, okay, how do I be with all the differences, and be a part of it and not worsen it?
Yeah. Uh, so it's hard. Let's just acknowledge that, get that on the table. I don't want to make it seem like it's easy, but it's definitely hard. I think, and I'm part of some groups of men who I love. Let me just make sure I say that again. I'm part of a group of men that I really love who vote differently than me and have different opinions on certain issues than I do.
So you
And
put yourself in a community with very diverse
I didn't
people.
initially, yeah, they were diverse because they were, like, because I knew physically they did, when I can look at them, they're different than me. But, but, um, but the key is that that I cared about them, right? And so and so and so when back in 20, whenever the not the previous election but the election prior to that, like, I knew how they voted in certain ways, and that was very just bothering to me. But the thing that I never took away from them is that I had very real experiences with each of those men. um, some more memorable than others, but where they showed up for me as a human being, right? And vice versa. And we had went through some experiences, some challenges, and been there with each other, in a way where I couldn't deny that there was a bond there. And like, for me, it was an opportunity to say, okay, like, I came to the conclusion that that it's okay that we disagree, but the most important thing is that we cannot strip human dignity away, right? Like, we have to make sure that we understand that all people are human, and that we're going to have differences of opinions, but just because we have a difference of opinion, you still have, a value to this world, right? That is essential to the world's existence, to my existence, that I cannot strip away from you. It's intrinsic, it's absolute, and it's not subjected to my conveniences and my own personal goals. Right? It just doesn't go
Right.
away just because you're
Your
no longer
value,
convenient to me.
yeah, your value doesn't go away if you vote differently than me.
Yeah, just
Or
because you're
if
not
your
no longer.
education, you're still
Yes,
every bit as valuable as me,
valuable.
right?
Yes, yes,
And if we
yes,
can come
exactly.
to that
I
belief.
think that's the first thing. Like, you have to kind of remember that has to sit there. And then the next component of it is that, um, for the problem that people have in speaking about these issues is that there's an absence of relationship. So what we do is, instead of building, getting to know each other, understanding each other, um, creating a human bond, what we do is we jump straight into the issue. And when you do that, it's problematic because, number one, when you bump up against people's beliefs and try to tear down people's beliefs, like, you have to remember that their beliefs form the basis of who they are, their whole identity. And so if you're poking holes in that, you're telling them that their life is a fraud, their life is something is less than. And so, yeah, I mean, if you just, through empathy, you should know that that's problematic, right? And that people are going to
Right.
fight back on that.
Yeah, yeah.
The only way that you get around that and get people to listen is you have to go through the heart of people. You have to, um, sit down, spend time to get to know people, to understand who they are, to understand their stories, to understand how they click, what things negatively impact them. And then, as you build up that picture, what you happen to do is you end up loving that person extremely well, right? And so
It's
now you
this
approach converse.
it's this human thing. It goes,
Yeah,
we want to come in and have these micro, I want my opinion heard and I want to stand on the issue. But the thing is, what I hear you saying is, the human thing is, once we know each other, those conversations, it's entirely different. And all of a sudden, it's not about the issue. It's because you've bumped into the human and you've had some kind of heart connection with the human. And now this
right.
stance of theirs, or this, you can start to see how it goes back to, their whole life. And it also gives you perspective.
Yeah, you can understand. It gives you an understanding why an individual thinks that a certain way. Um, some reasons may be good, some reasons may be bad. It could be circumstances, things that were done to them. And so you become a lot more compassionate about them. You begin to care for you begin to care for the person, and because you're like, let me not just attack this person because I care about them, right? So let me like help, let me come alongside of them in a way that's helpful. You begin to um, yeah, it's um,
It takes time too. As you talk to me, I'm thinking, the Instagram, Insta culture we have where, everything can be solved in 1 minute or 28 words tweeted out is, is the antithesis of relationship.
yeah. So I'm gonna put it this way. I have a friend who has historically put his politics in front of his personal convictions or his faith. Um, and he was willing to wrestle with that because he saw how his politics impacted me. The result of some of his politics impacted me and how I responded to it, right? And it didn't mean that his politics was wrong. It just means that what he saw was his friend, who he cared deeply about, was really impacted by this. That was enough for him to engage me in a conversation to say, look, man, like I'm sorry, right? Like that you're hurting, right? Let's let's continue to move and learn about each other and talk about each other, or talk to each other, so I can understand this and we can understand each other. And through that movement, through that relationship, he has flipped that, right, where his convictions, faith are forward in they dictate his politics. I didn't intend it to be that way. It's just how it ended up happening. And now he's part of a group of that I belong to, of gentlemen who are really trying to tackle issues of race, aggression, and poverty, right? And sits in those. I mean, he's like, this is a completely different person. But the reason why it wasn't a aim to get him there, like he still has opinions that are different and they're valuable, but he's in the conversations, he's building solutions, we're building solutions together, we're hearing each other. But the reason that all took place is because we had a relationship, we understood each other. And at the end of the day, neither one of us wanted to see our other friend hurt. We wanted to see our friends thrive and to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel cared for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my point in all this is that's what the framework that I've built is designed to do, is to put people, is to say, we're not going to talk about yeah, we got to solve an issue. This is the issue, but the most important component of this is us hearing each other, hearing our narratives, experiencing the emotion, um, which all help us get a better understanding of what these issues are and how they're really the real human cost, the real human impact of these issues. And once we hear that way in a certain framework, then we are more likely to come up with ways to help to solve these issues because it's touched us, right?
Right.
Because we don't want to see our friend. You're no longer a number of a person who's been impacted by something. You're now a human being who I've seen express real human emotion that I can connect with, right? And therefore, I want to be helpful to you, right?
Mm-hmm. Does
So
the work you're doing in the beloved community, do you see it has to come through this way, these micro networks and in these groups of where people are coming together and relationship is first, and the conversation comes through knowing each other in groups?
yes, it's definitely, it cannot happen in big groups. That's the other thing. Like I'm not sure why people feel like it's easier to talk about these very hot issues, right, in large groups. Because usually what happens is like people are just spouting off a bunch of opinions. People are either holding back and they're not saying things because they don't feel brave enough to be vulnerable, right? People are thinking like, man, what the heck is this for? Like, what's the purpose of this? I know if I say this, or like it's going to cost me something. Like it never results in anything good, like having these big conversations. So what I've advocated for is that we reduce the size of these conversations around these issues to smaller groups where we have a smaller amount of people, and that way it allows for an intimacy to occur where the individuals can walk through this process and get to know each other from their own personal narrative, based on the individual's personal narrative, um, and to know each other, to learn about the issue, and then to come up with a solution to this issue together, right? And I feel like that's just a much better approach. And yes, it's smaller. It doesn't run at scale. It's smaller and it's longer, right?
Yeah.
So people, some people have a hard time with it because it's not, because the thing is like, let's get a bunch of eyes on this and let's just get a big conversation together. And I don't have to go into names, but that's typically the model, right? And I think that
It's the
model
model
is
for
destructive
everything. We got to scale everything. We got to do it at scale, right? We got to say,
at scale.
okay, it touched 1,000 people and we had this, and that was success. 1,000 people came to it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Versus what really happened out of the outcome. So right now, what are you learning in terms of when I think, I'm thinking about my own personal building community, right? Because as an entrepreneur, I think that sometimes I've been better at I've been better at building communities for other people to engage in the
yeah.
community for myself, right? But then I'm also learning a lot about stewarding community and connectivity, right? And safety for other people, right? So that they can start, having that support network and not be on their own and be able to resuscitate each other. What are you
Mhm.
learning right now as you're working not only in your family's life, right? A building community and your own practices so you guys have the support. And then
Mhm.
what are you learning as you're working inside companies or organizations or with
Yeah,
small groups and ventures?
the vision is important. You have to have a cultural vision. How are we going to operate and govern our behaviors and norms? Um, and then how are we going to protect that, right? So 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 one of the I'm working with a university down here, and I'm building a cultural vision for them. It's based on the principles of the beloved community, and
Which you want to walk through those really quick for anyone that hasn't.
yeah, I mean, the first one is love, love in an altruistic way. That's the first principle. The second principle is dignity, that all humans are valuable. And that's independent of our own personal conveniences and goals. A spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood, although people try to say that it's a gender thing, it's really like it's about a spirit of kinship that's of close, but even kinship is an insufficient word for it because what the spirit is a spirit of a closeness, like we belong to the same people, and
Belonging.
therefore, yeah, belonging. Intolerance to poverty and aggression, um, inclusiveness, and then inclusiveness is the last one. Oh, sorry, inclusiveness, and then the last piece is um, the last one is
Reconciliation.
peaceful
Yeah.
conflict resolution. Yeah, peaceful conflict resolution, right? And so I tend to infuse that in any cultural vision that I do. That if you're going to be an organization that I work with, that these frameworks is like you have to integrate those principles into your vision. So this university has agreed to do that, and we include some other things, but the vision is important, right? Setting the vision for even the co-working space. We have a vision, and we filter all of our interactions through that vision. We put it out there up front. We constantly take a look at it, and we ask ourselves, are we living up to this vision? So I think that's the most important aspect is an organization must have a cultural vision that they built intentionally. I would say that includes, integrates the beloved community principles, right? And
Right.
then and then that they assess and they constantly monitor, right? Making sure that they're living up to that vision, or at least trying to live out to it.
So, what are some of the practices when you look at love, dignity, intolerance, inclusive, reconciliation, for you personally, which one of those is hardest? And
Oh, I don't know if I ever looked at it. I mean, they're all like hard, right? Like I don't like look, like you don't get, for example, the inclusiveness one, right? like it's hard to remember uh for example, one of the cultural visions I use the term brotherhood and sisterhood, and it's been a very interesting conversation because there's communities who feel like it's putting a gender on things, and we've had to talk through that to understand like there's a lot of stuff that people strap onto there based on their experience, based on their identities, who they see themselves as that, and that
Right.
those words have caused a lot of stuff. And so to have those conversations and try to get people to a place where we can come up with some common language that we can all agree on is very tough. So inclusiveness is tough. Like, like we're about to do some holiday decorations here at the Conduit, right? And we're like, all right, like what does that mean to be inclusive?
Yep.
As a holidays, like what do we include? What do we don't include? Like, look, the reality is you're going to offend someone, right?
Right.
The key is you're not going to always get it right, but it's not an exercise of getting it right. It's an exercise of trying, right? Nobody's going to hang you for not trying or for trying, right? You're trying to be this way. And if you mess up, then that's where love and dignity comes into play, right? Like, okay, got it. All right, we corrected this. And they know that you're operating from a sincere place. So
Yeah.
all of them are hard. I mean, like
Well, you
love,
said,
dignity is hard.
yeah, you said something interesting. Words are culture, right? So we were the Blue Zones. Dan, whatever his name is, that wrote that. He had something where he had looked at cultures of longevity and some of the practices, and one of them was the tribe of five with the Moasis tribe, and it was this whole. It was in a lot of the regions of the world where there's more centarians. One of the
Mm-hmm.
elements is the social, the community.
Mm-hmm.
People, right, and community and support, and in this one tribe they called it tribe of five, in the Moasis tribe, and it was this idea that when they were born there were five people that were identified to have their back for the rest of their life, and
Mm-hmm.
it was called a tribe of five. Well, we built that
Oh, that's
into
really
some
good.
of our learning stuff and our culture, and that word tribe for some
Mm-hmm.
people just was really, like you're saying, when you say brotherhood or sisterhood, tribe was trigger for some in terms of,
Yeah.
is the right word squad, is it team, is it, but what we're learning is that words do matter, right? To be inclusive you have to be open that the word you picked might not be the word somebody else would pick for this, and that the word
Yeah.
alienates them.
Yeah. So
You're
that's
trying to
interesting you
do
said that.
something good, right? And all of a
Yeah.
sudden
But
it's
there's a
like,
flip side to that. There's a flip side to that. Like some people, what I found in this work is that there is a lack of understanding about words and that we tend to morph words into what we want. And I think that there's a danger there, right? Like first of all, like one of the things I say is like for example, there's an issue of the word govern, right? This individual had a understanding of govern because this individual was born in the peak of the Trump period. This was brought up, and so they had an understanding of what govern looks like, and it felt authoritative, authoritative, authoritative. It felt oppressive. It felt like all these things. But this individual is strapping on their experience of govern of the word govern. I mean, their experience of governing onto the word.
right.
And I had to go back to the definition, and I said like that there's different styles of governing, but governing in itself, like this is what it means, right? It doesn't mean authoritative government. It could be all kinds of governing, right? And so one of the things I've learned is that we have to get square and agree on the common language and the term, and we have to resist making words and terms into strapping on our own experiences because that's what we do with words. Like the brotherhood thing, like the one person said, "Hey, I didn't." To me, that word is triggering because I didn't have a good relationship with my brothers and sisters, and I said, "Okay, that was based on your experience, but in the truest sense of the word, it means this." And so resist strapping on additional meaning, right? So I say all that to say is that we also have a responsibility to use the English language correctly, right? And if
Right.
we're going to change it, we need to agree on what the change is so that we can all be in the same place, right? And and then the
But
last piece of that is just simply it's just not like using. people want to use the word kinship, and I was like, that's a lesser word. It's less meaning, it's less powerful than the word brotherhood or sisterhood. And
Yeah.
so we're not going to like, words have power, and let's not diminish the power of the spirit of what I'm trying to say by using a lesser word, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard. I mean, that's my point. It's it's challenging work.
It is challenging work. What if you were recommend if you're talking to someone that's trying to create, you know, they're trying to drive community, they're trying to create a more inclusive, more loving community, or they're working on stepping out into community. What are some of the easy action steps? What are some baby steps?
For the individual who's trying to build community, I would say that having a vision is essential. That's you got like that's although that it seems like an easy step, it's actually a hard step. So I don't think there's a baby step in it. I mean, but I get what you're trying to say. But the vision has to be there. Um,
Just like you
and
have
then
a mission for your personal life, everything for you starts with the mission and the vision. So
yes,
once I have that, right, and I'm an individual that doesn't feel connected. I've gone through the pandemic. I feel kind of isolated. I am deeply wanting to feel more connected, but I'm not. You know, I've been an independent entrepreneur or person out there, and I've gone through the pandemic. How does what is your recommendation for that person as they start to move toward community? What does that look like?
okay. So I just want to make sure I parse this the right way. So there's we're talking about two things. There's a builder of a community, and then there's one who wants to participate in it.
Right.
The builder of the community must have a vision, and they must assess themselves along that vision constantly. Every single process, every single thing they do, they must say, is this staying true to our cultural vision? And if
Yeah.
the answer is no, then they need to get rid of it. If the answer is yes, continue doing it.
They're
That's the
they're
first
the
thing.
steward. They're the steward.
Yes. And on the other side of the participant, the, the first place I would say is go to the company's vision and say, do they have a vision of what's their vision, and then if they have the vision, is it, do you agree with it? If the answer is yes, then it's yes, and then you step into it and say, how can I experience this to see if they live this out?
So look for aligned organizations or groups, right? Whose
Yeah, I
vision
would say,
matches up with yours, and then go put a toe in the water. Go
yeah,
experience them. Go just hang
yes,
out and see what you think.
yes, yeah, yeah. So it requires effort on both ends. It requires for the community builder to have a vision, to live it out. For the person who wants to participate, it requires them to go and seek it, to understand if they agree with it or not, and then to go and be proactive in stepping into it. Right? They can't just be passive and expect that it'll come. Just take that first micro step, which could be just engaging with coffee or attending something or signing up for something. Right? But both ends require proactiveness. Right? You cannot get to community through being passive. It requires being constantly proactive, and living it out and experiencing it. And it's going to be and it will be uncomfortable at times. But that's the only way that you can live into the power of community. If you choose to take those small steps into it, right? But you have to take those small steps. No, someone cannot bring it to you. You just can't expect it to show up.
And then what are some of the things that you would encourage us in terms of as we're starting to speak or we come to community to talk and listen, what are some of the things, how are you holding space? I know you are, when you're facilitating it, right? You have some rules of conduct, things
Yeah.
that what would you encourage us to do as we step out to get ourselves in more diverse places and starting to, be a part of the solution? What are some of those best practices in terms of how we come to that moment?
Okay, just I want you to repeat that so I make sure I'm hearing this question right.
I'm talking for it's one thing for the steward, right? And you as a facilitator, you're working with organizations. At the end, I'll have you share a little bit about more of the type. But I'm thinking of all of us that are trying to step into more diverse communities right now, right?
Right.
That have some sense of fear because maybe we've been isolated or haven't been in very diverse groups.
Mhm.
What would what would be your encouragement or some things you would remind us of as we step into
Yeah.
those?
Uh, One, I just like to say it's always change is hard, right? Being in groups that are different are hard. It's hard, right? Let's just acknowledge that. Even for myself, walking into rooms that are look uniquely different than me is challenging. So we have a tendency to go with people who look, act, and breathe the same. But understanding that's but being in relationship with individuals who are quite different is where all the human growth happens. You cannot grow a cent. You can't grow a micro bit more if you're around people who are exactly the same as you. No growth happens. You're all the same,
Right?
right? So in order for you to grow, you got to be around people who are different. That's number one, and that's hard. Okay. And in order to do that, the one thing that we say that I say is that you got to be brave, right? It's not about your safety, right? Safety is can be sometimes like my personal comfort and make so I can be comfortable in things, right? No, you need to be uncomfortable in order to be for growth. And so to be uncomfortable, what I ask people to do is to be brave, right? Be brave enough to hear hard things and to say hard things, right? Be brave enough to hear hard things and to stay, right? Be brave enough to say hard things and know that it's not going to cost you, right? Just be brave. But then more importantly, remember that these people have dignity, right? And you don't want to erode, you don't want to say things carelessly in a way that erodes someone's dignity or their value. And the best way to do that is through love, right? It's just to understand that you have a responsibility when you're saying things to try to at least say them in a way that's helpful, in a way that's loving, right? That's patient, that's kind, um, towards people. So I'm not giving people license to say whatever they want to say, right? Just to throw like, look, I always say this. I was like, look, the first half of my life, I was very good at rolling hand grenades into rooms, right?
You just
And allowing them
you
and
just said
allowing them to
it.
blow up. I just said it, right? Now, the second stage of life, that hand grenade is still coming into a room, which is just me. And what I recognize is that I have to, if I'm gonna care for people well, I have to make sure I keep my hand on the latch, right? That's where the love takes place. My conscious attempt to remember that I have this grenade, which is just our intentions, just to sometimes want to just be captains of chaos, right? But to care for people well, so I don't blow myself up and the people in this room. I have to keep myself constantly in motion. So sometimes I feel like my finger is coming off the latch. I have to put it back on, right? Sometimes I want to take it off, but I'm like, that's not good. Just breathe, right? But yeah, just be brave. Don't strip people's dignity, and remember that you have to care for people well. You have to be altruistic.
Oh, wow, powerful. Well, as we get, I know we got to let you get over to Disneyland with your son Roman on his birthday.
Yeah.
So, as we start to wrap this up, tell us a little bit about what kind of organizations you want to do work with, or who should reach out to you in terms of the beloved framework if they want to know more.
Yeah. So the Beloved Community Framework, the website is belovedframework.com. But I'm looking for any individual organization that is trying to have hard conversations or deal with challenging issues and topics internally, which they all will have challenging topics. There's always challenging topics. It doesn't always have to be the big three, right? Like
Right.
because police brutality or whatever. It's just the fact that like any organization that's having challenging conversations, and they have a desire to have conversations that are inclusive, dignified, and lead towards healing and repair. Those are the organizations that I'm interested in talking to, and the work that I do over with a couple groups. It's just like putting in a framework that allows them to deal with stuff internally within the organization and externally. How do we respond to issues, right? How do we engage these issues that we care about? How do we respond internally when it's an issue of aggression, poverty, or racism occurs within our organization? Like, what are the mechanisms the framework that we put in place to lead people through it, to be able to talk about this in a way where it doesn't destroy what we're doing? We actually come up with a solution, and everybody come, like it's like I said, it's restorative. So yeah, I mean, that can be open to corporations, government agencies, school, universities, schools.
Perfect. And then I know you're good at managing your boundaries. So what social platforms are best to reach out to you on?
Man, that's a good question. I mean, people could follow me. They can follow me on Twitter, Instagram. I mean, I'm Kyle. I think it's just Kyle C. Steele on both. Or they can just email me at hello@belovedcommunity or belovedframework.com.
All right, I'll put those, you send those over to me. I will put all those
Yeah,
in the show notes and I will share that. But
yeah, absolutely.
as always, you always inspire me to think about, you know, the integration of my personal life, my values and my vision have, for my businesses and the communities I've stewarded have always been very similar to yours. But my person, that thing I can't control is me. And like, I don't always keep my finger on the grenade, right? And I have so often been the grenade rolling into the community that I'm stewarding, but also
Yeah, we all are.
a lack of discipline in my personal life, that what I would hold for the community and the work communities that I stand up and steward, that I don't hold myself to that same principle of having that kind of community around me, and
Yeah,
that's where I think, this wholeness that we've been called to, not doing life alone. And that's what I feel in the pandemic is reminding me that, it's time to resuscitate each other and to let people know that you also need resuscitated. You're not only the steward of communities, you need to be in community.
yeah, yeah. So the encouragement to you is the fact, so that, and that's everything right there. It's like there's like an old cartoon back in the day called G.I. Joe, and they used to go G.I. Joe, and it was like knowing is half the battle, right? And in this case, that is true. Like that's played out. Like it's at least knowing you could live and be oblivious to everything you just said. But the fact that you know it says that you're living in attention, and living in attention is where exactly you need to be. And so you'll be okay. You'll be
I'll
fine.
be okay.
You'll
Because
be fine.
part of my community and my tribe squad, I can always call Kyle and have him give me a good talking to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or you can give me a good talking to. It goes both ways. So,
Oh, all right. Well, you go celebrate a second birthday, and thank you for
well,
blessing us. And we will share this, and it will bless others.
thanks, Pam.
Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Bye bye.